The crying stopped the moment Riven almost walked past. That was the part that stayed with him. Not that it started, but that it stopped. Like whatever small voice had let it out suddenly remembered the rule. Don't be heard. Cold rain hit the back of his neck. The alley smelled like wet concrete and rust. Riven's shoes were already soaked through, both of them, the left one worse because the sole had been separating at the toe for 3 weeks, and he hadn't fixed it yet, because fixing things cost money he didn't have. He stopped walking, turned around, under a flickering streetlight that had no business still working. A boy, no older than 5, knees pulled to his chest, arms wrapped around them so tight his little knuckles had gone pale. Beside him, slumped against the brick wall, a man. Black suit. Expensive. The kind of fabric that didn't belong in an alley like this. A dark stain spread from his side, slow and quiet, the way dangerous things move when they don't want to be noticed. The boy looked up, eyes red, jaw set, trying very hard not to cry again. Please. His voice barely made it out. Don't leave him. That was it. No sobbing, no begging, nothing dramatic. Just those 4 words from someone small enough to still believe that asking worked. Hi viewers. If you found someone hurt and alone in the rain tonight, would you stop? Or keep walking? Drop your answer in the comments. Be honest. Riven crouched down to the boy's level, looked at the man, checked his breathing, shallow but steady, pulse present at the throat, wound ugly but not arterial. His hands moved without asking permission, pressing the cleanest part of his jacket sleeve against the man's side with firm, even pressure. The boy watched every move, didn't flinch, didn't run, just watched, like he'd already decided Riven was safe before Riven had decided anything at all. Getting them both out of that alley wasn't graceful. The man was heavy, built like someone who didn't skip training even when life got complicated, and Riven was not a large person. But he was stubborn, which had always been worth more than size anyway. He flagged down a cab 2 blocks over, paid with the last folded bill from his front pocket, and kept his hand pressed firm against the man's ribs the entire ride. The cab driver didn't ask questions. Riven didn't offer any. His apartment was on the edge of a quiet street that nobody visited on purpose. 1 bedroom, worn floors, a kitchen window that faced a parking lot. Furniture that had been secondhand when he bought it and was 3rd or 4th hand now. The heat worked in the morning and gave up by evening. It wasn't much, but it was safe. And right now, that was the only currency that mattered. He got the man onto the bed, got the boy settled beside him, and spent the next 40 minutes cleaning the wound by the light of the bathroom bulb because the bedroom lamp had a short. The fabric of the man's suit jacket alone probably cost more than 2 months of Riven's rent. The watch on his wrist, still running, still perfect despite everything, cost more than that. Riven set those thoughts aside, focused on what needed doing. The boy, Tavi, he'd whispered his name once and only once, never moved from the man's side, held his hand the entire time, watched Riven work with those careful, steady eyes that belonged on someone much older. Is he going to be okay? Tavi asked. Yes, Riven said. He meant it. The man's breathing had steadied. The bleeding had slowed. His body was clearly used to stress. Even unconscious, his muscles held tension the way trained people do, the kind of tension that stays even in sleep. This was not an ordinary man. Riven pressed a clean cloth against the wound, taped it down, and stood. Tavi was already falling asleep, one hand still curled around the man's fingers, cheek against the mattress. Riven turned off the bathroom light, stood in the dark for a moment. Some cries aren't loud because they've learned nobody comes. He pulled the thin blanket up over the boy's shoulders, moved to the doorway, and looked back once at both of them. Then he sat down on the kitchen floor with his back against the cabinet, because there was nowhere else to sit, and waited for morning. He didn't sleep, and somewhere around 3 a.m., In the silence of that small apartment, the man muttered something. A single word. A name. Riven couldn't fully make it out. But whatever it was, it sounded like a command. Like something people obeyed without question. And that one word, half-formed in a stranger's sleep, sent something cold and quiet through Riven's chest. Because it didn't sound like the name of a man who got lost. It sounded like the name of a man who'd chosen to disappear. Morning came in through the kitchen window with no warmth attached to it. Riven made coffee, the cheap kind, the kind that required patience and low expectations, and stood at the window with both hands wrapped around the mug just to feel the heat. The parking lot outside was empty. The street beyond it still. A normal morning pretending nothing had changed. Nothing had changed. Except there were two strangers in his bedroom. Tavi was awake first. Riven heard the small footsteps before he saw him. Careful, quiet, like a child who had learned to move without disturbing the air. He appeared in the kitchen doorway still holding the man's hand, which meant the man was awake too, which meant Riven was about to have a conversation he had not prepared for. He poured a second mug, set it on the counter. The man appeared behind the boy a moment later, and the entire energy of the room changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just shifted. The way a room shifts when someone walks in who is used to being the most dangerous thing in it. He was standing fully upright. No visible sign of pain in his posture, though that meant nothing. People who were trained to suppress pain were actually the most dangerous kind, because they didn't tell you how hurt they were until they weren't anymore. His eyes moved across the room once. One sweep. Clocked every exit, every surface, the window, the door, Riven in that order. Calculated. Quiet. The wound dressing Riven had put on was still in place. The man had checked it already. Riven could tell by the slight adjustment of his shirt. "Where am I?" he asked. Voice low, flat. Not hostile, but not warm either. The voice of someone who expected answers, not conversations. "Safe," Riven said. A pause. The man looked at him for the first time, really looked the way people do when they're trying to determine if a person is a threat or a variable. "Who are you?" "Nobody important." Riven slid the second mug across the counter. "Coffee's ready if you want it." The man didn't move right away. He looked at the mug, then back at Riven, like he was waiting for the angle, the request, the price, the reason behind the gesture. There wasn't one. That seemed to confuse him more than anything. Tavi let go of his hand and crossed the kitchen to Riven without hesitation. Tugged twice on his sleeve. Looked up with those same steady eyes. "Do you have cereal?" "I have oatmeal." "That's not the same." "No," Riven agreed. "It isn't." He made the oatmeal. He put brown sugar on it. Tavi sat on the counter without being invited to and ate it like it was exactly what he'd wanted. Survival teaches you to avoid danger, but loneliness teaches you to ignore it. The man, who still hadn't touched the coffee, watched all of this. Watched Tavi's ease. The way the boy had crossed a stranger's kitchen like he belonged there. Something moved behind the man's expression. Small, controlled, but Riven caught it. "You're going to want to know my name," the man said finally. "Only if you want to give it." Another pause. "Kale." One word. Simple. Dropped into the quiet of the kitchen like a stone. Riven nodded and focused on washing the pot. He didn't ask for a last name. He didn't say "I believe you" either. Because the thing about a lie told carefully, it usually carries exactly one truth buried inside it. Kale wasn't the whole name. Riven had heard enough half-truths in his life to know when someone was handing you the piece they'd decided was safe to give. Whatever the full name was, it lived in a different world than this kitchen. But Tavi, cereal-less and apparently fearless, looked up from his oatmeal and said, "His name isn't really Tavi." The man's voice shifted exactly 1 degree, a warning wrapped in gentleness. Tavi closed his mouth, but not before Riven saw it. The flash of something in the boy's eyes. Not fear, More like, I know things I'm not allowed to say yet. And that was fine. Riven turned back to the dishes. Let the silence settle. He noticed three things about this man in the span of that morning. 1. His hands were still, not restless, which meant patience. 2. He watched Tavi more than he watched Riven, which meant priority. 3. When Riven reached past him for the dish towel, the man stepped back exactly the right amount. Not too far, not too close. Trained. Deliberate. This was not a man who ended up in alleys by accident. This was a man who had made a choice. And whatever that choice was, it had cost him something. Riven finished the dishes. Tavi finished the oatmeal. The man finally reached for the coffee mug, wrapped both hands around it the same way Riven had, and stood at the window, looking at the parking lot like it contained something worth looking at. He didn't say thank you. Riven didn't need him to. What mattered more was what the boy said. 20 minutes later, while Riven was folding a blanket in the other room and Tavi had quietly followed him in. They were chasing us, Tavi said. Soft, direct, matter of fact, like it was information Riven needed and Tavi had decided he should have it. Riven stilled, kept his hands moving, didn't want to spook whatever honesty the boy was offering. Were you scared? He asked. Tavi thought about it. Actually thought, the way children do when they're being serious. Yes, he said. But he wasn't. Riven looked at him. Kale. Tavi nodded. Then, very quietly, like it had slipped out before he could stop it, they weren't supposed to find him. The blanket settled into a fold. Riven set it down. He wasn't supposed to be found, and yet here he was, injured, hidden, in a nobody apartment on a nobody street, not calling for help, not reaching for a phone, not triggering whatever network a man like that must have had behind him, which meant one of two things. Either he couldn't call for help, or he was choosing not to. Riven walked to the window, looked at the street, quiet, normal, a woman walking a dog, a car pulling out of a driveway 3 houses down. He almost said something, then stopped, because 2 blocks up, a black car rolled past. Slowly. No reason to be moving that slow. Then another one. Different plates. Same pace. Same direction. Riven's hand pressed flat against the wall beside the window frame. He didn't step back. He didn't call out. He just watched the second car disappear around the corner and stood very still in the kind of quiet that isn't peace. It's a question the street is asking and not answering. The coffee was gone and Tavi had fallen asleep on the couch. Riven sat at the kitchen table with both hands flat on the surface, doing nothing. Not eating. Not reading. Not looking at his phone. Just sitting with the particular stillness of a person who has learned that waiting is a skill and panic is a luxury. Kale stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the hall. He'd been there for a few minutes now. You saw them, he said. Not a question. 2 cars, Riven said. Slow roll. No stop. They're mapping the block. Riven absorbed that. How long do we have? Kale looked at the wall. Hours. Maybe less. He said it evenly. Like hours was plenty of time. Like less wasn't a problem. Like the whole situation was a minor scheduling inconvenience rather than whatever it actually was. Riven looked at him directly. Are you going to explain any of this? No. Silence. Okay, Riven said. He got up, started checking the window latches. Old habit. The kind that comes from living in places where the locks were always the last thing anyone fixed. Kale watched him. You're not afraid, he said. I didn't say that. You're not acting afraid. Riven kept moving. Checked the back door next. Bolted. Good. Being afraid and being useful aren't the same thing. I figured that out early. Power doesn't disappear when it's wounded. It just waits. Kale was quiet for a moment. Then, most people would have asked me to leave. Most people don't have a 5-year-old asleep on their couch. A beat. Something shifted in the air between them. Small. Barely there. but real enough that Riven felt it and didn't look away from the door he was checking. Tavi trusts you, Kale said, carefully like the sentence had edges. He doesn't know me. That's why it matters. Riven turned around at that. Kale was looking at the couch, at the boy curled under the blanket. There was something in his expression that he hadn't bothered to control, maybe because he thought Riven wasn't watching, maybe because for just a moment he'd forgotten that shutting things down was supposed to be automatic. He looked tired. Not physically, though that too. Somewhere deeper. The kind of tired that doesn't come from one bad night. He doesn't have anyone but you? Riven asked. Kale's jaw moved. He has me. I know. I meant anyone else. Nothing. That was the answer. Riven nodded once, turned back to the window. Outside, the street was still. The woman with the dog was gone. The driveway 3 houses down was empty again. Everything looked exactly like a morning that wasn't preparing for anything. That was the part that bothered him most. It was too still. Not the stillness of nothing happening, the stillness of something already in motion. Riven pulled his phone from his pocket. No missed calls. No messages. He hadn't expected any. There wasn't really anyone who called him, but he checked anyway, because people check when they're working out what to do next and their hands need somewhere to be. He set the phone on the counter. The man who muttered a name last night, Riven said, didn't look at Kale. In his sleep. That was you. A pause. What did you hear? Not enough to understand. Enough to know it wasn't casual. Kale didn't respond to that. Riven turned around. You were giving orders, even unconscious. Still nothing. That's not a judgment, Riven said. I'm just building a picture. Kale looked at him. That same measuring look from this morning, but different now, not assessing threat, assessing something else. Like he was trying to categorize Riven into a framework that didn't have the right slot for him. What kind of picture? Kale asked. One where you chose this, Riven said. Not one where it happened to you. The kitchen was very quiet. Tavi made a soft sound in his sleep. Turned over. Went still again. Kale's eyes tracked to him automatically. Checked. Confirmed safe. Looked back. You're perceptive, he said. Low. Almost like he hadn't meant to say it. I just pay attention, Riven said. Most people don't. But when you've been invisible your whole life, you learn to notice everything. Because nobody's noticing you. Something moved across Kale's expression. He didn't answer. But he didn't look away either. And somewhere outside. Faint. Barely there. Low against the quiet of the neighborhood. Engines. Not one. Several. Riven heard it and didn't move. Let the sound settle. Counted. More than 2. More than 5. He walked to the window. Slow. Careful. Looked out at an angle so he couldn't be seen from the street. His hand pressed flat against the wall. The first black car had stopped at the far end of the block. Then a second directly across from it. Then a third closer. 20 yards out, engine running, no one getting out yet. Just waiting. Riven counted 6 before he stopped counting. Kale, he said. The man was already behind him. Already looking. They're not here for you, Kale said quietly. Riven turned his head slightly. What does that mean? Kale's voice was flat, controlled. But underneath it, something that wasn't quite calm. It means they're not here to hurt you. That's not an answer. That's not even close to an answer. Riven turned back to the window. More cars. Pulling in from both ends of the street now. Black. Every one of them. Moving with a kind of synchronized patience that was more terrifying than speed would have been. 8, 14, 20. The neighbors were noticing. A curtain twitched across the street. A front porch light came on at 9 in the morning, which meant someone inside had seen something that made them want more light even when there was already plenty. 28, 30. Riven's hand pressed harder against the wall. He'd grown up being told he was too small to matter, too quiet to be important, too poor to be worth the attention of anyone who had options. He had lived his entire life in the spaces that power forgot about. And now power had found his street. All of it. At once. He counted to 100 before the cars stopped coming. And the street, this small, forgettable, invisible street that no one had ever cared about, went completely, totally silent. Not one door had opened yet. Not one person had stepped out. Just 100 black cars sitting in perfect stillness, engines low, waiting for something Riven didn't understand. He exhaled slowly, turned around. Kale was watching him, not the cars. Him. Step outside, Kale said quietly. You need to see this. Riven didn't move right away. That was the thing about a moment like this, the body knows before the mind catches up. His feet stayed planted. His hands stayed on the wall. His eyes stayed on Kale's face, reading it the way he read every face that had ever told him it's fine. Trust me, nothing bad is happening. But Kale wasn't saying that. He was saying, you need to see this, which was different, which was honest in its own controlled way. Tavi was still asleep on the couch. Riven looked at him once. Then he crossed to the front door, unlocked it, and stepped outside. The air hit him first. Cold, damp, left over from last night's rain, still sitting in the low places. Then the sight. He'd counted them through the window, but counting and seeing are different things. Through glass, at an angle, in the fraction of your peripheral vision, it's just numbers. Out here, standing on his own front step, on his own cracked concrete walkway, in his neighborhood where the mailboxes leaned and the gutters needed clearing. 100 black cars. Every one of them gleaming. Every one of them parked with the kind of precision that didn't happen by accident. Not a bumper out of line. Not a single gap that was wider than another. The street looked like it had been redesigned overnight. Like someone had decided this ordinary block was now something else. Real power doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives inevitably. A neighbor 3 houses down had come out onto his porch, coffee in hand, and stopped completely still when he saw what was on the street. He didn't go back inside. He didn't call out. He just stood there with his mug raised halfway to his face and forgotten. Another neighbor, the woman from the corner house, had cracked her front door and was looking through the gap, not opening it wider, not closing it, just watching. Fear doesn't always sound like screaming. Sometimes it sounds like silence, like everyone on a street deciding at the same moment to become very still. And then the doors opened, not all at once, but almost, starting from the farthest cars and moving inward like a wave, controlled and deliberate. Men in black suits stepped out into the morning light, expressionless, eyes moving in the precise, trained way of people who are paid to notice threats before anyone else does. Riven counted 12 visible before he stopped counting those 2. They didn't move toward him. They moved to positions, gaps between cars, corners, natural observation points, securing the space without fanfare, without aggression, without a single raised voice. Not an attack, a formation. Tavi appeared beside him. Riven hadn't heard him wake up, hadn't heard him cross the floor or open the door. But there he was, standing at knee height, one hand finding the hem of Riven's sleeve automatically. Children don't understand power. They understand safety. Are they here for him? Tavi asked. His voice was quiet, steady. He was looking at the cars the way children look at things that are too big to fully understand but too real to pretend away. Riven put one hand on the boy's shoulder. I don't know yet. They look like the other ones. Tavi paused. But different. Riven crouched down to his level. Different how? Tavi thought about it, frowning slightly, the way he did when he was trying to translate something he knew into words he had. The other ones were looking for us. He tilted his head toward the street. These ones already know where we are. That landed quietly. The difference between being hunted and being found. Riven stood. One of the suited men had separated from the formation and was walking toward the house. Steady pace. Not fast. Not slow. The walk of someone who had already decided the outcome and was simply traveling to meet it. He stopped at the foot of the walkway, looked directly at Riven. "Is the occupant of this residence present?" he asked. His voice was completely flat. Not rude. Not warm. A voice built entirely for function. Riven blinked. "I live here. I'm aware." The man's eyes moved past him to the front door. "I'm asking about the other occupant." Behind Riven, the front door opened. He felt it before he heard it. A change in the air, the way a room changes when someone enters who commands it without trying. Kale stepped onto the porch, still in last night's clothes. Shirt untucked, the wound dressing visible at his side if you looked. No jacket, no armor, nothing between him and the morning except exactly who he was. And the man at the bottom of the walkway, composed, expressionless, trained, looked at him and went completely still. It lasted only a second. Then, with the kind of precision that only comes from deep practice, the man at the foot of the walk inclined his head. Not a nod. A bow. Low. Deliberate. Unambiguous. Behind him, in a ripple that moved outward from the front of the house like a wave running backward down the block, every suited figure in Riven's line of sight did the same thing. Synchronized. Silent. Like a field bowing to wind. Riven stood in the middle of it and didn't move. Not because he was afraid. Because something had just shifted underneath his entire understanding of the last 18 hours, and his body needed a second to catch up to what his eyes were telling him. Tavi's hand tightened on his sleeve. Riven looked down. The boy wasn't looking at the cars anymore. He was looking up at Riven, waiting, like whatever came next. It mattered that Riven was part of it. And from somewhere behind him, Kale's voice, "Come inside." Not to the men in the suits. To Riven. Inside, the air was different. Not tense, loaded. The specific weight of a room that holds too much unsaid and is starting to feel the pressure of it. Kale stood in the center of the kitchen. Tavi had climbed back onto the counter without asking and was watching with the calm, attentive expression of someone who already knew most of the story and was waiting for the adults to catch up. Riven closed the front door. He didn't lock it. Something told him locking it wouldn't mean what it usually meant anymore. He leaned against the counter a foot from Tavi and looked at Kale directly. Said nothing. Because in Riven's experience, silence was the most effective thing you could offer a person who was preparing to say something they'd been holding back. Fill the space for them and they'll hand you something easy. Give them the quiet and they'll eventually give you the real thing. Kale looked at him. "You want an explanation," he said. "I want whatever you're willing to give." A pause. Something in Kale's jaw tightened and released. "My name isn't Kale." Riven had known that since this morning. He nodded once. "Kale is..." The man stopped. Started again differently. "It's what Tavi calls me. It's a piece of a name I stopped using." "Why did you stop?" "Because the full name comes with a weight." He looked at the window, at the street where 100 cars were sitting in perfect silence. "One I couldn't put down on my own. So I put it down the only way I knew how. By disappearing." He didn't confirm it, didn't deny it. "They were supposed to give me 3 days," he said, "before they activated the search. Tavi and I were supposed to be back before anyone noticed." He paused. "Someone moved the timeline. The people who were chasing you. They accelerated it." Riven's eyes moved to Tavi. The boy met his gaze steadily. Too steadily for a child who'd spent last night in a stranger's apartment after being chased through the rain. "He's been through this before," Riven said. Not a question. Kale's expression shifted. "He adapts. That's not the same thing." The silence between them stretched out and neither one of them tried to close it. Outside, an engine murmured. Low and steady. and then settled back into quiet. The formation holding. No one entering. No one leaving. Just waiting, with the particular discipline of people whose entire job was to be ready for a signal that hadn't come yet. "Why didn't you call them sooner?" Riven asked. "Last night, when it was happening." Cale didn't answer immediately. He looked at his hands, then at the mug still sitting on the counter, then at nothing in particular, the way people look when the honest answer requires them to locate it first. "I didn't want them to come," he said. "Not yet." Riven let that sit. "You were in an alley bleeding," he said. "Yes." "With a 5-year-old." "Yes." "And you didn't call people who would have had you safe in 12 minutes." "No." He looked at Riven directly. "I didn't." Riven exhaled quietly. He understood it in a way he couldn't entirely explain and didn't try to. The way you could have a lifeline and choose not to pull it. Not because you wanted to suffer, but because the moment you pulled it, everything would restart. The weight would come back. The name. The world that came with the name. And for just a little longer you needed it to not exist yet. "Loneliness isn't about having no one," Riven said. Quiet. Half to himself. Cale looked at him. "It's about not reaching for them," Riven finished. Something in the room changed again. Not dramatically. Just a door opening somewhere that had been closed. Tavi, who had been perfectly still on the counter for the last several minutes, slid down, crossed the kitchen, slipped his hand into Riven's without looking up. Just held it, like that was a thing he had decided and didn't need to explain. Riven looked down at him. Tavi looked up. "He stayed in the alley," the boy said, "because he didn't want to go back yet." Riven looked at Cale. Cale was watching Tavi with an expression that had given up controlling itself. Just open, unguarded. The face of a person who had not been witnessed for a very long time and wasn't sure how to hold still for it. "He does that," Cale said. His voice was lower now. "Says the thing nobody else will say." "Smart kid," Riven said. "He didn't get it from me." Outside, a knock at the door. Not aggressive. Single. Precise. The knock of someone who already knew the answer but was observing the form of asking. All three of them looked toward the door. Tavi's hand tightened around Riven's. Cale straightened. And in the second it took him to do that, something in his posture reset. The exhaustion didn't disappear, but it moved behind something else. Something solid. Something that had been there the whole time, waiting to be needed. The man who had bowed at the foot of the walkway appeared in the doorway. He looked past Riven. Looked past Tavi. His eyes found Cale. "Sir," he said, "we need to move." Cale nodded. One motion. Economical. Then he turned to Riven. And for the first time since he'd woken up in this apartment, since he'd stood in this kitchen and taken the coffee and looked at the parking lot and given away a piece of a name, he looked at Riven without any of the calculation in it. Just looked at him. "You didn't have to do any of this," he said. Riven held his gaze. "I know. Most people. I'm not most people." Cale was quiet. Tavi was still holding Riven's hand. And from the doorway, the suited man waited with the patience of someone who had learned that some pauses were not delays. They were decisions being made. Cale looked at Tavi, then at Riven. "You're not staying here," he said. Riven blinked. "Excuse me? After this morning?" He glanced toward the window, toward the street and everything parked along it. "You've been seen. By people who don't forget faces." Riven hadn't thought about that. He thought about it now. Silence moved through the kitchen. "What are you saying?" Riven asked. Cale didn't answer right away. He looked at Riven the way someone looks when they're checking whether an offer will land right. Whether the person across from them will understand what it is and what it isn't and won't mistake one for the other. "I'm saying," Cale said slowly, "that you have about 4 hours before people start asking questions you won't want to answer alone." Riven's hand was still holding Tavi's. "And," he said, And I'm not leaving you here to answer them. The room held its breath. Tavi looked up at Riven with those steady, knowing eyes. Already decided. Already there. The suited man in the doorway didn't move. The cars outside didn't move. Everything was waiting on Riven. This man who owned second-hand furniture and a leaking shoe, who had walked down an alley in the rain and heard a cry too quiet to be an accident and made a choice without calculating the return on it. Now the return had arrived, and it was parked on his street in 100 cars. You have 5 minutes, Kale said quietly, to decide. Riven looked at the kitchen window, the parking lot, the ordinary, forgettable view he had looked at every morning for 3 years. He looked at Tavi. He looked at Kale. He let go of the counter. The suited man didn't wait. He stepped back from the doorway, turned, and that was the signal, because outside, something shifted. The formation tightened. Men who had been standing at intervals moved closer to the house. Not fast, not aggressive, just closer, the way water fills a space it's been given permission to fill. Riven stood on the porch and watched it happen. He had 5 minutes, Kale had said. 4 of them were already gone. The lead man, the one who had bowed, positioned himself at the foot of the walkway again, facing outward now, back to the house, scanning the street with the kind of attention that didn't miss anything twice. Riven looked at the cars. All 100, every one of them still running. The low sound of engines had become a kind of ambient pressure, less a noise now and more a feeling, like the neighborhood itself was holding its breath under the weight of what had parked in it. A curtain across the street moved, then went still. The neighbor with the coffee mug was gone. The porch light at the corner house was still on. Riven turned and went back inside. The most dangerous people don't need to raise their voices. Kale was standing where he'd left him. Tavi was beside him now, hand in hand, both of them watching Riven walk back through the door like they'd already agreed on what they were hoping for. I need 10 minutes, Riven said. Kale's eyebrow moved slightly. I said 5. I heard you. Riven crossed to the bedroom. I need 10. He didn't wait for a response. In the bedroom he moved fast, not frantic. Fast the way people move when they've practiced keeping their life small enough to carry. 1 bag. Canvas. Bottom of the closet. He'd packed it before in different circumstances and for different reasons, and some of those reasons he didn't revisit. The muscle memory was there. It didn't need thinking. 2 changes of clothes. His phone charger. The folder of documents at the back of the drawer. IDs, a lease agreement copy, 2 years of papers that mattered. A photograph, small, face down on the nightstand. He picked it up, looked at it for half a second, put it in the bag. He zipped it, stood, looked around the room. The bed, the lamp with the short, the window with the cracked lower pane he'd taped from the inside, the floorboard near the door that creaked if you stepped on the left side of it. 3 years of a life that had been designed to be invisible. And now, apparently, it was done. He didn't feel what he expected to feel. He felt lighter. He walked back out. Kale looked at the bag, then at Riven. 6 minutes, Riven said. Something moved at the corner of Kale's mouth. Not quite a smile, but closer to one than anything Riven had seen from him yet. Tavi was already at the door. The lead man outside had moved the walkway clear. A path, straight to the nearest car, direct and unambiguous. One of the rear doors was open, waiting. Riven stepped off the porch. The morning air hit him again. Same cold, same damp, but different now. The pressure of those 100 engines surrounded him on both sides, and every suited figure in his line of sight tracked his movement with eyes that were neither hostile nor friendly, only precise. He kept walking, didn't hurry, reached the car. Tavi climbed in first. Easy, like he'd done it before, like this was just the next part of a thing that had been happening for a while. Riven got in after him. The seat was something he had no category for. Not just comfortable. the absence of every discomfort he'd ever normalized without realizing it. He sat down and his back settled into it, and something in his spine unclenched that had been clenched so long he'd forgotten it was. The door closed. Quiet. The engine noise from outside gone. Just the low hum of this one car. Cale slid in on the other side. The lead man took the front seat. No words. The car pulled forward. And through the tinted window, Riven watched his street begin to move past him. The cracked mailbox at number 14. The oak tree with the root that had buckled the sidewalk 2 houses down. The parking lot he'd looked at every morning from his kitchen window for 3 years. Ordinary. Invisible. He watched it until it was gone. Then looked forward. Tavi was between them, and without discussion or ceremony, the boy leaned his weight into Riven's side and closed his eyes. Like that was where he was supposed to be. Cale looked at them, said nothing. But he didn't look away. And in the front seat, the lead man, who had given nothing all morning, no name, no expression, no warmth, said quietly, "Sir, there's been a development." Cale's entire posture reset in the span of a breath. "When?" 40 minutes ago. A pause. "Which location?" "The secondary one." Silence. Riven didn't look at Cale. Didn't ask. Let the words settle into the car without reaching for them. But he felt the weight they carried. Whatever Cale had walked away from, whatever he'd hidden from for 3 days in the rain and alleys and second-hand apartments, it hadn't been waiting for him to come back. It had been moving without him. The car didn't slow down. That was the first signal. When a driver gets news that matters, the foot lifts off the accelerator. Not enough to stop, just enough to process. A half-second of physical hesitation that the body makes without permission. The driver's foot didn't move. Which meant this wasn't new information. Which meant the driver had known before he said it. Riven filed that away and said nothing. Tavi was still pressed against his side. Eyes closed, breathing slow and even. Either the boy was actually asleep, or he was very good at pretending. Riven suspected it was somewhere between the two. Children who had been through things learned to rest inside uncertainty because certainty wasn't always available. Cale sat straight. That kind of straight that isn't comfort, it's containment. "What do we know?" he said. The access point was forced. The driver's voice stayed level. Professional. Nothing taken. No damage beyond the point of entry. A message. "Yes, sir." Cale was quiet. Riven looked out the window. The neighborhood was changing, block by block, the buildings getting taller, the streets getting wider, the world outside shifting from ordinary to the kind of ordinary that costs more to maintain. Trees that were too even. Sidewalks that were too clean. Loneliness isn't about having no one. It's about not reaching for them. "Why didn't they call you earlier?" Riven asked. He wasn't sure why he said it. It came out before the calculation could catch up. Cale turned his head slightly. "I mean the 40 minutes, Riven said. "Before they told you." Pause. The driver's eyes moved in the rearview mirror. Just briefly. "They were confirming details," Cale said. "They were giving you the ride first." Silence. "You were in an alley 2 days ago," Riven said. Not accusatory. Just aloud. Thinking it through in real time. "You didn't call. You had 100 people who could have been there in minutes and you didn't call them. And now they get to you, to your home, to the secondary location. And the first thing your people do is make sure you're in a moving car before they say anything." He looked at Cale. "They're protecting you from the information. Not just from whoever did this." The car moved through an intersection. A long pause. "They've always done that," Cale said. "And you've always let them." Another pause. Longer. "Yes." Riven looked back out the window. He wasn't judging it. He'd done the same thing in different rooms with different stakes. You let people manage your reality when your reality got heavy enough that carrying it alone started costing more than you had. That was just a human thing. That was what people did for the people they protected. Why didn't you want them to come? Riven said. In the alley. Kale didn't answer right away. Tavi shifted slightly against Riven's arm, still breathing slow. I was tired, Kale said finally. 2 words. But they weren't talking about the physical kind. 3 days, Kale said. Tavi and I. No security. No staff. No schedule. Just 3 days where I wasn't anyone's answer. He looked at the boy. He'd never had that. He'd been with me since he was 2.5. Every house I've ever lived in had men posted outside it. He's never just had a normal Tuesday. Riven looked at Tavi, thought about him in that alley, holding the hand of the man he trusted most in the world, not crying loudly, because he'd already learned not to be heard. How'd they find you? Riven asked. Someone within the network. Not deep peripheral, but close enough. Do you know who? I will. That wasn't a threat. It wasn't even particularly cold. It was just a fact, the kind a person states when they've already done the math and the outcome isn't really in question. The work just hadn't been done yet. Riven believed him. The car turned onto a road that was lined on both sides with old trees, thick-trunked, branches meeting overhead. Like the road had been planted before the city around it decided to become a city. In the rearview mirror, Riven could see the line of black cars still following. Every one. Like he'd dragged 100 shadows out of his neighborhood and they'd just come with him. What happens now? He asked. Kale looked at him. Now we establish where Tavi is safe. He glanced at the boy. That comes first. Always. And then I go back to being myself. He said it the way you say something you've made peace with even if the peace isn't comfortable. Riven looked at him. You don't like it. No, Kale said. I don't dislike it either. It's just what the thing is. The weight you mentioned. Kale nodded. Once. What's your real name? Riven asked. No calculation behind it. No angle. Just asked it. The car passed under the last of the big trees. Ahead, through the windshield, a gate was already opening. Tall, iron. The kind of gate that said, what's on the other side of this is not the same world as what's behind you. Kale looked at Riven with that expression again. The open one. The one that had stopped trying to manage what it showed. Caden Ezra Voss, he said quietly. 3 names. The weight of them filled the car. Tavi stirred, opened one eye, looked up at Riven. Now you know, the boy said. Like that was an important thing. Like that was a door opening. The gate finished its arc and the car moved through. And on the other side, a house. Not a house. A structure that described wealth the way mountains described height, not by being loud about it, but by simply being a scale you hadn't prepared for. Riven sat still, looked at it, then looked down at the canvas bag between his feet. The bag that held 2 changes of clothes, a folder of documents, and a small face-down photograph. He almost laughed. Didn't. But almost. You should have told me to pack more, he said. Tavi giggled. Actually giggled, the first real, unguarded sound the boy had made since the alley, and it cut through the weight in the car so cleanly that even the driver's posture shifted. Kale looked at Tavi, then at Riven, and for the first time he smiled. Not managed, not calculated, real. The house was quiet in the places it mattered. That was the thing Riven noticed first. Not the scale of it, not the staff who appeared and disappeared with silent efficiency, not the fact that the hallway he was standing in was wider than his entire kitchen had been. The quiet, the specific, settled quiet of a place that had been built to be safe. Not silent. The house made sounds, footsteps in other rooms, a low hum from somewhere below, distant voices carrying on about something that required no urgency. But underneath all of it, stillness. The kind that a building earns slowly over years by keeping the things inside it whole. Riven had never lived anywhere that felt like that. He stood in the hallway with his canvas bag and tried not to look like a person taking inventory. He took inventory anyway. A woman appeared at the end of the hall, mid-40s, sharp eyes, natural hair pulled back, clipboard that she wasn't looking at because she'd already memorized whatever was on it. She came toward them without hurrying and with the particular confidence of someone who ran this space and had for a long time. "Mr. Voss," she said. Not warm, not cold, exactly calibrated. "Deja." Kale acknowledged her with a nod. "Tavi's room is ready." She looked at the boy. Something in her expression softened a degree. "I had them put the books back on the low shelf." Tavi looked at her seriously. "The blue ones. All of them." Tavi released Riven's hand and followed Deja without being asked. Like this was a pattern they'd established before. Like Deja and the blue books and the low shelf were part of a world Tavi understood even if Riven didn't yet. Kindness from the powerless hits differently. Riven watched him go. The hallway felt bigger once he was gone. Kale stood beside him. Neither of them moved right away. "She's been with the house for 11 years, Kale said, not filling silence. Just giving Riven context he hadn't asked for but needed. "She's good with him," Riven said. "Yes." Kale paused. "He doesn't have a mother. She's never tried to be one. Just present. Consistent. He knows she'll be where she says she'll be." Riven absorbed that. Thought about what that meant to a child. That small, foundational thing, the person who will be where they said they would be. "You have people everywhere," Riven said. "The staff. The security. Deja. All of it." "Yes." "But you spent 3 days in the rain with just the kid." Kale looked at the wall. "Yes. And you don't think that's a problem?" Kale studied him. "I think it was necessary." "For who?" A pause. "Both of us." He looked toward where Tavi had gone. "He needed to see me as a person once. Not as the thing I am in this house. Not as the name." He was quiet for a moment. "I needed to remember I was one." Riven set his bag down on the floor. Looked at it. Looked at Kale. "You helped us when you had nothing to gain," Kale said. Riven shook his head. "I didn't think about gain. That's exactly what I mean." Silence stretched between them, but not the uncomfortable kind. The kind two people settle into when they've moved past performing for each other, and neither one wants to ruin it by speaking too soon. "You're going to want to give me something," Riven said. "Some kind of gesture, because that's how this works in your world. Someone does something for you, you calculate the appropriate return, and you execute it." Kale didn't deny it. "I don't want it," Riven said. "I know. So don't. I'm not." He looked at Riven with a directness that had nothing transactional in it. "I'm not asking you to stay because you helped me. I'm asking you to stay because Tavi let go of my hand for the first time in 2 days to follow Deja to a room, and he did it because you were still in the building." Riven went still. That landed in a place that didn't have a name yet. "He trusts you," Kale said. "He doesn't do that. He's 5. He's been 5 for almost a year, and the list of people he trusts is very short. You're on it. You've been on it since the alley." He paused. "I don't know how to explain that except to say I trust his instincts more than I trust most adults." Riven looked at the floor. At his canvas bag sitting on a floor that probably cost more per square foot than his monthly rent. "I don't know what staying here looks like," he said. "Neither do I," Kale said. "Not exactly." That was an honest answer. Riven appreciated honest answers the way some people appreciated food. Specifically because there had been years when they weren't available. Kale studied him like a decision was finishing itself. "You're not staying as a guest," he said. "And not as staff. I don't have a word for it yet." Riven looked up. "You're staying," Kale said. "Because this house needed a person in it who helps without calculating the return. And Tavi needed to know that people like that exist." He paused. "And I needed to remember the same thing." The house breathed around them, quiet, steady, safe in the way that things are safe when they've been held together by people who meant it. Deja appeared at the end of the hall. "Mr. Voss, the north wing is ready." Cale looked at Riven. "That's you," he said. Riven picked up his bag, started walking. Behind him, Cale said, "Riven." He stopped, turned. "Thank you," Cale said. Just that. No calibration, no performance. Just the two words, given straight, from a man who had very clearly not said them often enough. Riven nodded once, kept walking, and somewhere down the hall, the sound of Tavi laughing at something Deja had said. Light, unguarded. The laugh of a child who had decided, for at least this moment, that the world was okay. That laugh carried through the whole house. 3 weeks later, Riven still woke up early. Not because he had to. Not because the cold crept in through a cracked window pane. Not because the heat gave out at night. Not because the parking lot outside needed watching. He woke up early because his body hadn't learned yet that it was allowed to stop. He sat at the edge of the bed in the north wing and let the light come in slowly. The room was too still, too even. No flicker in the ceiling, no draft through the baseboards. Just steady, uninterrupted warmth and a window that faced something green instead of concrete. It should have been easy to sleep here. He was working on it. He got up, pulled on a shirt, padded down the hall toward the kitchen. Not the main kitchen that had its own staff rotation, but the smaller one on the north side, the one Deja had shown him on the second day and said, "This one's yours if you want it." He'd wanted it. The coffee was already made. Not by him. He stood in the doorway and looked at it. Tavi was at the counter, both hands around a small mug of something that smelled like hot chocolate, feet swinging because he was too short to reach the floor from the stool. He had a book open in front of him, one of the blue ones. He was reading it with his finger moving under each line, lips barely moving. He didn't look up when Riven came in. "The third page has a mistake," Tavi said. "The dog in the picture is brown, but the words say he's black." Riven poured his coffee. "How many times have you read that book?" "A lot." Tavi turned the page. "It doesn't get less wrong." Riven sat on the stool beside him. Tavi leaned slightly in his direction without thinking about it. Sometimes power doesn't save you. People do. This was the thing about the last 3 weeks that Riven hadn't expected. Not the house. Not the security that had quietly reorganized itself to include him in its protective radius without anyone saying so directly. Not the fact that Deja had appeared on day 4 with a full set of keys and a 7-word explanation. "The staff know who you are now." The thing he hadn't expected was this. Morning. Coffee. A book with an error that never got less wrong. A child who leaned. Cale appeared in the kitchen doorway. He did that, appeared without announcing himself. Not stealthily. Just present, the way people are when they've stopped needing their entrances to make a statement. He'd been different in the house. Not softer exactly, but more complete. Like the version in the alley had been compressed, cut down to survival minimum, and the version here had the room to occupy its actual size. He managed things from this house that Riven could only partially see. Calls that happened in the study, meetings that required certain rooms to be cleared first, decisions that arrived through Deja via a look rather than words. The name Caden Ezra Voss was spoken in certain rooms of this house with a weight Riven was still learning the dimensions of. But in this kitchen, at this hour, he was just a man pouring coffee. "He's been up since 5:30, Cale said, nodding at Tavi. "The dog is still the wrong color," Riven said. Cale looked at the book. "It was the wrong color last week too. And the week before," Tavi confirmed without looking up. Cale sat down across from them, the 3 of them in the small kitchen. The light coming in at the low morning angle that made everything look like it was being considered carefully. No staff, no security visible, no weight of names or formations or 100-car processions. Just this. Riven wrapped both hands around his mug. I've been thinking, Kale said. Tavi closed his book. That was a tell. The boy had learned which of Kale's openings required attention. The position of what you are here, Kale said, looking at Riven, doesn't have a name yet. I said that on the first day. You did, Riven said. I've been trying to find one. He paused. I don't think there is one. Not in the existing list of things I can offer people. Riven waited. But Tavi had a suggestion. Riven looked at the boy. Tavi looked back with those steady eyes. Family, Tavi said. One word. Set down as simply as a fact. Not a request. Not a pitch. Just, here is what the thing is, and here is its name, and I have already decided it applies. The kitchen was very quiet. Riven looked at Kale. Kale looked back. I'm not going to ask you to decide right now, Kale said. I'm not going to put a shape on what that means before you're ready to shape it yourself. He looked at his coffee. But you've been here 3 weeks and the house is different. Tavi is different. A pause. I'm different. Riven turned his mug in both hands. 3 weeks ago he had been a person designed for invisibility. A worn apartment. A leaking shoe. A parking lot outside a kitchen window. A life built deliberately small so that nothing large could take aim at it. He had walked down an alley and heard a cry that stopped before it finished. And turned around. I'm different too, Riven said quietly. Tavi picked up his book again, found his page, put his finger under the line, and leaned. 6 months after the alley, Riven stopped keeping track of the date. Not because it didn't matter, because the thing he'd been counting toward, some fixed point where it would feel real, where he'd stop expecting the floor to disappear under him, had stopped being a point and started being a place. He was in it. He just hadn't noticed exactly when it happened. The north wing was his. Fully, practically, in every way that mattered. The coffee in the cabinet was the kind he liked. The bookshelves had his books mixed in with ones Tavi had decided Riven needed to read urgently. The window latch had been fixed the second week. When someone on the maintenance staff noticed, he always checked it before sleeping and asked, without judgment, if he'd like it repaired. He'd said yes. They'd fixed it the same day. Small things. That was the part nobody told you about safety. It wasn't the 100 cars. It wasn't the gate. It wasn't the name on the paperwork or the set of keys or the staff who acknowledged him now with the same nod they gave each other. The nod that said you belong to this house and this house knows it. It was the latch being fixed the same day. It was the coffee being right. It was a 5-year-old putting a book in your hands and saying, read this. There's a mistake on page 3. I want to know if you see it too. And for the first time, safety didn't feel temporary. Tavi was in school now. A small place, careful teachers, a classroom that Kale had visited once before enrollment and Deja had visited twice more after. The kind of attention that was thorough without being loud. The boy had made a friend, one which was enough, which was more than enough. A girl named Simone who also had opinions about picture book inaccuracies and who Tavi had described as very serious about the facts. Riven had met her once. She was, in fact, very serious about the facts. He liked her immediately. The house had a rhythm now that included him without announcing it. He had a role that still didn't have a name in any official sense and had stopped needing one. He was there when Tavi needed someone between staff and family. He was there when things got heavy in the late evenings and Kale appeared in the small kitchen not to talk, just to exist in a room with another person. He was there in the mornings early with the coffee and the book and the light. He was there. That was the whole thing. That was the complete description of it. He was standing in the garden when Kale found him that afternoon. Not the formal garden at the front, the back one, unplanned and slightly overgrown at the edges, the kind of outdoor space that happens when someone runs out of instructions for it and it gets left to its own decisions. Riven liked it out here. Kale came to stand beside him. They didn't say anything for a while. The afternoon was the kind of quiet that autumn makes. Leaves somewhere in their change, the light coming in sideways, everything a little slower than it had been in summer. Tavi's homework is about families, Kale said. Riven looked at him. He had to draw his. Kale paused. He drew 3 people. Riven was quiet. You're in the middle, Kale said. That shouldn't have hit the way it did. It did. Riven looked back at the garden. At the overgrown edges. At the place where something had been planted a long time ago and had spent years quietly deciding what it wanted to become. He spelled your name right, Kale added. He's been practicing. Riven exhaled. Slow. Long. The kind of exhale that takes something with it on the way out. Something that has been sitting in the chest so long it had started to feel structural. I want to ask you something, Kale said. Okay. And I want you to answer it without thinking about what the answer should be. Just what it is. Riven turned to look at him. Kale looked back. Open. Steady. The face of a man who had put the weight down. Not for 3 days this time, not temporarily. Put it down and left it somewhere that didn't require him to carry it alone anymore. Are you happy? Kale asked. Just that. No architecture around it. No context to manage it. Just the simplest question and the most impossible one. Riven thought about the alley, the rain, the shoe with the separating sole, the cry that had stopped before it finished. He thought about the canvas bag on the floor of this house. The latch, fixed the same day. The book with the mistake that never got less wrong. Tavi in the middle of a drawing, spelled right. Yes, Riven said. He didn't dress it up. He didn't qualify it. Just yes. Kale nodded once. Looked back at the garden. Good, he said. And in that word, in that one quiet word given without performance, was the whole of it. Not the cars. Not the gate. Not the name or the weight or the 100-suit formation on a street that used to be forgettable. Just a man asking another man if he was okay. And getting the truth. The afternoon light kept coming in sideways. The garden kept doing what it had always done. Growing in the directions nobody planned for. Finding its shape in the space it had been given. Becoming something over time that nobody had specifically requested but that made the whole place better. And Riven stood in it. Visible. Known. No longer invisible. Not by accident. By choice. And for the first time in longer than he could count backward, the place he was standing felt permanent. Not because nothing bad could reach it, but because the people in it would reach back. That was the whole truth of it. That was all safety ever really was. If this story moved something in you, share it. Drop a comment and tell us. When did someone choose you when they didn't have to? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. And if you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications. Every week we bring you stories about the moments that change everything. The quiet choices. The ones nobody sees coming. You won't want to miss what's next.